Hey guys, today I'm going to be looking at a Waycrest Manor 19 from a Guardian Druid's point of view. This was shot a few weeks ago now. It was during a fortified Sanguine week with Grievous as well. This is during Season 3, so obviously Beguiling will also be in play here. I'm going to kind of be going over more or less in this video kind of from pull to pull what's going on and how a Guardian Druid handles that properly. This was a really clean run. My group did an amazing job this time around. Really clean. We ended the queue with a few minutes left, actually, close to a 2-chest even. So with a little bit more aggressive pulling, we could have made it a little faster. This wasn't perfect, but I'm going to be going over what went well and what didn't go so well. So we're going to be jumping in right here now. So at the very start of the pull, or the very start of the dungeon, this is a pretty easy room. A lot of tanks tend to just grab everything. Having misdirect and tricks is going to help here, keep aggro and pull everything in. And I'm going to be doing my best to handle this enchanted until our hunter or shaman can take over knocking this back. But using Anima of Life and Death, I'm able to kind of grab snap aggro, which is a little bit tough for Guardian Druids, especially playing with classes like Demon Hunter that have a lot of burst. If you see the Demon Hunters pulling 200k plus on just this opening pack. But this pack, like I said, isn't too dangerous as long as you're making sure you're getting your kicks, AoE stuns, and then slows, so a little bit of kiting, but it's mainly those casts you're going to want to try to kick as often as possible. So Waycrest Manor is a very difficult dungeon on certain weeks, and especially when it's Sanguine, it's a pretty difficult dungeon because the tight corridors and hallways, it's really hard to navigate through, especially since like almost everything drops Sanguine pools. You have to be extremely careful. Now, we did get a bad route here. There's 4 different routes you can get for Waycrest Manor, 3 or 4, but we got upstairs right, which is bad because we start with this witch. We tried to shroud through, but we did grab the witch, and somehow it only pulled the mastiff from that first pack, so we just take it. These witches, the Heartsbane, are going to be very difficult. For some reason, their melees hit extremely hard, and they're also going to do a mixture of physical and magical damage. So Guardian Druids don't handle that too well, but we're going to just handle this pull as we try to figure out how we're going to maneuver the next area of the dungeon, which is around Rawl's room, which is the banquet hall. This part of the dungeon is going to be really difficult because of the tight hallway and the amount of trash that's in the hallway. So it's easy to chain pull since there's a lot of pats, patrols walking back and forth, and we're going to be pretty limited on the space we have because of the Sanguine pools that are going to drop. So it's really up to the tank and the DPS to make sure they're first off not stunning mobs in the Sanguine, but also on the tank to make sure you're kiting properly and positioning the mobs within the dungeon, and especially in this hallway, that are in the right spot. So we're going to start with a pretty small pull here. We just want to kind of get everything under control, and I don't want to get over flooded with Sanguine too quickly before I'm able to kind of figure out where I want to move these guys to. So we did get the patrol to move in with the Gorgers, and then the Piglet's also going to make its way in, and then this is when we're going to I'm going to try to back up into this corner as much as possible to start our Sanguine trail. That's going to pretty much follow us all the way down this hallway. Now, our job is to basically pull things just to the edge of the Sanguine pools and to kind of like almost zigzag through. If not, you're going to have to kind of work back and forth. Sanguine pools are really kind of difficult to place because some of the mobs are very fidgety, which is, you'll notice just tanking. And then also these Gorgers are going to leap. So having them leap through the pools is really annoying. When they're casting Retch, they're obviously channeling and it's not kickable. So you have to bait them as well. So it's on the DPS as much as the tank to position these guys properly. So we're doing an okay job here. There is some space between some of the Sanguine pools, but I'm going to make some adjustments here, which I'll point out. So the Gorger does leap over to our healer, and we're going to just slowly keep kind of backing up and trying to maximize the space. So making sure things are dying nice and close to the wall, making sure things are dying. I'd get a Typhoon there to kind of knock it back, and that's what I was talking about, is making sure we're zigzagging to leave us the most amount of space. And then we're going to kind of chain everything here. There is a void around this corner, which when a void is channeling its spell, it's in combat with you, and everything that gets close to it, it's going to chain. So you want to just make sure you're ready for that. So I knew everything was going to chain. We're talking about that now and how we're going to handle it, and we're just making sure these kicks are going off. But because the void is around the corner, we don't really have to worry about it. So yes, we're in combat with it, but we're going to just handle it after we make sure these Sanguine pools are dropped properly and all these mobs are dead. So I do want to take a quick second to talk about the composition because it's kind of a unique comp. You're going to see obviously some meta classes. Rogue and Demon Hunter are extremely efficient in this dungeon and kind of in dungeons in general. But I am running with the Resto Shaman. Now, a Resto Shaman does have a lot of synergy with the way Guardian Druids tank. They have a massive health pool. And because typically Shamans tend to stack like crit and verse, more or less, they're going to have really fat heals when we're low on health, which is when we need it the most. And then it's going to amplify off of our mastery, because our mastery increases the healing that we take from both internal and external sources. So Shamans are going to synergize really well. The only issue that they have that I find is that, like, when it comes to enchanted emissaries and stuff like that, they kind of lack the toolkit to keep them away. So typically the tank or our hunter has to do that. But luckily for us, this was if I'm not mistaken, it was actually a void heavy week. So it wasn't too bad. Or maybe it was enchanted heavy. I don't even remember. But that's the only thing they really lack, and they lack externals. But because of the build that I'm currently using, it's not going to be too much of an issue. So while we were doing that void, I tended to attack. We kind of pulled more into the void emissary to kind of clear everything down on top of it, not to waste too much time. So it left us with this entire hallway now to use for clearing out Rawl's room before we handled Rawl, which is kind of a difficult room to traverse because of the different patrols in there, and especially if you're leaving Sanguine in boss rooms, it becomes very difficult to handle the encounter. Rawl's more of a unique case because he's kind of a standstill boss. He won't move. He's kind of rooted into his one spot. It's Sanguine in that room is not too much of an issue, but I do want to minimize that, like, Sanguine in the room. So we're going to keep pulling everything out into the hallway and handling these pulls as large as we can. Sanguine is nice because it doesn't affect the mobs directly when they're alive, or when there's no Sanguine pools down. And then Grievous is just a little bit additional healing, but because of the way the Shaman heals with stacked healing and really nasty large chain heals, typically Grievous isn't too much of an issue. Just that trash is going to hit extremely hard, and without having externals, it was a little sketchy at some points during this dungeon. Spirit Link isn't really too much of an external. Like, it's a group external, arguably, and it's a damage reduction, but it's nothing like Iron Bark or Sack or something like that. Something else that another healer would bring. But I do really like having a Shaman in the group because they can put out a good amount of single target damage on bosses, and they do a pretty good job at giving us some kind of they just have a really good toolkit that benefits the group, from Windrush Totem to the ability to stack heals, hexes, stuns, AoE stuns, stuff like that. So I'm going to kind of split this room. I normally try to split this room into 2 or 3 pulls at a time. So it's typically I do the left side and the right side. But there is a pat and then a kind of a pack that's kind of right in the middle of the room that's really hard to get without going in. But I'm going to end up grabbing that pull in a bit here. So again, I'm just kind of rotating back and forth down this hallway to make sure we're avoiding Sanguine pools. Nothing in these packs they tend not to run away that often. There's no mechanics that make them kind of flee in fear or whatever when they're low health, so it's not too much an issue if we're kind of close to Sanguine. So I want to just keep slowly cutting them back as Sanguine disappears behind me, and it's not too much of an issue. You just have to be aware that everything's getting interrupted, like the dinner bell, for example. Wretches are being avoided. Wretches, especially when people are kind of starting to stack up Grievous, can be pretty dangerous. If these hit you when you're at low health, you're pretty much going to die. Now, we just do a good job at making sure our Rogue and our Demon Hunter are keeping everything under control. We're throwing out the frozen traps as well. Everyone in this group performed extremely well in this hallway, keeping everything CC'd and minimizing group damage. Now, one thing I want to note here is the healing. So both myself and the Shaman are both healing about 40k or so HPS, which is insane. Guardian Druids have a very, very easy time with sustaining themselves, and the Shaman does a really good job at keeping AoE group healing down. Now, the one downside of that is typically when they're doing healing, they're not doing as much damage, but they make up for it for the utility that they bring. Shamans do have a lot of passive heals, though. They have their totems, as you can see here. They have Healing Ring, they have Cloudburst Totem, and then they also have Riptide, which is a pretty potent heal. And their healing also, it's amplified by their mastery, so the lower health you have, the more their heals are going to heal you for, which is super good. So when people are low, it's easy for a Shaman to top them off. So that's the issue about Grievous sometimes, is that, like, other classes sometimes can fall behind when Grievous stacks are really high, but Shamans actually don't. Now, if there's a lot of group damage going out, sometimes because their casts are typically slower, and it takes a little bit of setting up to get strong heals off, it's typically very easy for a Shaman to get people out of Grievous, for the most part, as long as they're getting those nice beefy crits. So we're going to go into boss here. Rawl isn't too difficult. It's a very, very easy encounter, and it's nice to do him first as a boss, because it kind of, it kind of gets you in a mindset like, okay, we just face roll this boss and it's going to be super easy the rest of the instance. Now, some people like to do the triad first, which my group does as well, because it's kind of a make or break it. If you wipe on triad right away, you know, like, okay, the key's probably burnt. But when you do raw first, it's kind of like, I think it's kind of like motivation to kind of just, you're gonna, you know, it creates like kind of synergy, not synergy, it just gives you a good energy to have taken through the rest of the dungeon. So we're dodging these tenderizes back and forth. Call Servants is probably the one dangerous, I would say, mechanic in here. If he does start to get if he starts to consume a lot of servants, his damage is going to just multiply, and that's when it becomes an issue. But with Ursal's Vortex, with Frozen Traps and other things that we have just stunning in general, it's normally not an issue. We have a lot of AoE in this group, running both Outlaw Rogue, with our DPS running Essence of the Focusing Iris, and just basically overall cleave. These ads won't die, especially because it's fortified. Fortified, normally bosses are just kind of like, it's like the break in the dungeon. Like right now I'm healing 14k HPS, our shaman's healing 11k HPS. Like it's not dangerous whatsoever. And we're mainly focused on doing as much damage as possible. So kind of that was the first phase of this encounter, and he's already down to 20% health, so it's not going to take too much longer. So kind of going back towards composition, like I've said before in some of my other videos, I like to run with a rogue almost at all times because Guardian Druids tend to lack a lot of damage. So having Tricks of Trade is insanely powerful. Because we're running with a Demon Hunter this time around, I mean, I run with the Hunter normally, but having an additional MD, or Misdirection, in the group for the Demon Hunter's burst ability is going to be insanely useful. And that's oftentimes you'll see me not losing aggro is because I'm constantly being MD'd and tricked, like all the time, constantly. So it's a super nice thing to have these two compositions in the group. Now, with the Demon Hunter, they're just going to bring a lot of damage. They're not really benefiting anyone except the except our Shaman's damage, because most of us are doing a lot of physical damage. I'm doing physical damage. The Hunter and Rogue are doing a lot of physical damage. But having the Demon Hunter in the group just adds a lot. Darkness is an extremely useful ability, especially on fortified weeks. There's going to be a lot more damage incoming during trash pulls, and especially pairing with the shaman's abilities to kind of like heal in a very tight knit area. It's just those two, they synergize extremely well. So this group was thought out, but at the same time it wasn't thought out. We're just some friends who like to run together, but there's a lot of synergies within this composition. And everything here brings a lot of damage, a lot of cleave. I stood in the Sanguine pools a little too long there. Just be careful to do that because it doesn't do like base damage. I think it does a percentage of your health. So also taking damage from, again, like I've said, these witches are going to be probably the most dangerous pulls in the dungeon. You just want to be wary of where you're standing. Being in Sanguine too long could easily cause you to cause a group wipe, or does a tank to go down, which will obviously have a negative turn of events. So with that, with Sanguine, we're always going to be pulling backwards to make sure we're leaving us enough room to have like a clear area to keep clearing trash. So we use Rawl's room to clear about half the courtyard here. And then as these hounds die, we're going to get the Thorn Shaper out of Sanguine, and then I'm going to continue pulling these other Thorn Shapers, just so we're going to be cleaving. Now, they do the effigy reconstruction, but because none of them are effigies, it's not going to be an issue, so we don't really have to kick too much besides their Infected Thorns. Their Infected Thorns casts are pretty much priority, and then we're just dodging Uproot. So these things do hit hard, but I am going to roll externals if I need, not externals, but DRs if I need. I still got both Charges of Survival, I got Barkskin up, and it's not too much an issue. I still have a Frenzied as well. I'm just making sure I'm keeping up mitigation. We're kicking the Soul Fetishes as often as we can, and that's pretty much the extent of it. This pull's not going to be too difficult to do. So making sure that the courtyard is kind of staying clear because we may need to use it for the boss, and also this next pull we're going to want to obviously pull Matron back because we don't want it to be too close to the boss, but we also need to not bring it towards Sanguine. So here what we're doing is why we're not pulling right away is because we're figuring out and getting everything lined up so I can get Matron to a certain spot and then the hounds could be dragged somewhere else, because oftentimes if you tank everything on top of each other, the hounds are going to they're going to die pretty quickly. They have a very small health pool, they're not elites. And then Matron is going to do Thorn Barrage, which is a channel. So if the hounds die like they just did and she was on top of them, she's just not going to be taking damage because she's sitting in Sanguine. So Matron is kind of a pain in the ass to move, but we're just going to, that's why we did that. That's why we did what we just did there. So classes with taunts, I could have done it the other way around. I could have had Ankosh, our Demon Hunter, taunts Matron away, and then I could have tanked the dogs. But just because of Fortified 19, Matron's going to hit extremely hard. As you can tell, my health pool is taking a lot of massive hits here. I just instead opted to take Matron myself and let Ankash handle the hounds for the few seconds. So I love running with Demon Hunters because of that. I also like running with Monks because of that. Monks bring, obviously, a physical damage buff, but also the ability to taunt. So here we drop Blink, and then we're also going to drop Darkness. So those two overlapping are insanely, insanely powerful. And that's just really to make sure that the Storm Barrage isn't going to kill me. They're actually making jokes here that, you know, if I do go down, that Odie will be able to tank. By doing evasion, he was asking me what type of damage the Thorn Barrage is, which is kind of funny, but I do stay alive here, and we're now on to the Soulbound Goliath. The Soulbound Goliath is an extremely, extremely easy boss for Guardian Druids to handle, and this is mainly because of one talent choice, and this is our Earth Warden talent. So every time we cast Thrash, the next like attack that the enemy does will be reduced by 33%. So that counts, these crushes count as that. So as long as we're mitigating and we're thrashing right before crush comes out, like the damage is completely mitigated. You can see here I'm already healing like just 25k a second, and my health pool is like not being touched. It's like I'm not only dodging attacks, but when I don't dodge them, I'm mitigating so much of the damage, both with Iron Fur, just the base armor that I have, and also with Earth Warden. Extremely powerful. Now sometimes you will see my health dip super low here. That's not too much of an issue. With Frenzied Region, I'm going to heal that mostly back up. Sometimes if nothing lines up, you know, if you don't get your Thrash off in time, or you don't have any mitigation up, and the dodge DR is like on cooldown, you will take a big hit. But normally you can roll externals and it's not an issue. Now I do decide to drop here. I actually normally try to not, but I was kind of low, but I tried to push it to 50%. So if we can get him to 50% without me using anything, I can now just not worry about moving him the rest of the time. So I'm going to just basically plant my feet, rotate my DRs and my mitigation, and just make sure that I'm not getting hit by a lot of these big attacks. So, and then also what's nice about Shamans too is because of the way their mastery works, like even if I do dip really low, like it takes them one healing surge or healing wave with a Riptide Empowered to jump back up to full. So this is an extremely easy boss. I'm gonna like roll the survival instincts. I'm gonna just roll mitigation and make sure I'm thrashing at the right time. I got Bark Skin up, 15% to go. It's not even an issue. I'm gonna just kind of plant, which also allows our shaman to spend a little bit more time doing damage than he would healing. So he's still pulling about 17k, 16.5k, which is, I mean, still respectable for any healer, especially on a 19 fortified week on this boss. So the boss at 2%, 1%, boss goes down. I still have a survival left. I was mitigating properly and a pretty clean kill there. I didn't necessarily have to drop, but I ended up doing that. So this is kind of the hallway that's super dangerous. Now we decide to now, again, because of Sanguine, pull out of the hallway into the courtyard. We're going to use kind of there's sections of the dungeon, and we're going to go back to the last section to clear, which isn't as effective as time. Like obviously you want to keep momentum going forward, but you don't really want to backtrack too much, but because of just the nature of Sanguine and the affix, we are going to do that. So again, pretty scary pull here. There's not only a Runeweaver Witch, there's also the Enthralled Guards, which are just going to do insane amount of damage. Marked Cleave is going to do a lot of damage. Luckily we can curse the spell, and our shaman can curse the spell, so not too much of an issue. For some reason the Runeweaver went down super quick. We actually think that it like didn't get scaled with fortified or the level of the key. Like it had like 600k health, so it like basically just blew up as soon as it spawned. So we got really lucky here. Like that thing normally does a lot more damage and would obviously be alive a lot longer, but as soon as it came out, it just smacked us. So we're going to take this hallway. Like I said, it's a pretty dangerous hallway, so we're going to take it nice and slow, waiting for the Pat to go up the stairs, and we're going to be pulling this Captain and Guard and just kind of doing 2-target cleave for now, which the group's pretty good at. We do run obviously the Outlaw Rogue, the Demon Hunter, and the Beastmaster Hunter all do excellent passive cleave on top of their single target rotation. So doing this hallway slow is better than rushing it, because if you rush it and try to do bigger pulls, especially for how much this hallway hurts, unless you have some crazy coordination and rolling in like an extreme amount of DRs, this hallway becomes extremely difficult, especially on a 19 fortified. I don't ever really recommend like mass pulling this hallway unless you're going to do some like crazy kiting strats, which we could have done. We could have maybe pulled one more, maybe the patrol in with this, but because of the way, like just because of Sanguine and Grievous and just the amount of damage that goes out, it's just a little bit more difficult to kind of do those pulls. So I decide to try to go down the hallway to see if the door's open. I'm pretty sure it won't be, just because of the route that it gave us. Unfortunately, the trash pulled pretty much right away, and the witch spawned. So we're going to have the witch here, plus this pack. So again, a pretty dangerous pull. We were kind of hoping for the luckiness that we had earlier with the Runeweaver that spawned. but unfortunately this guy has 5 mil health, so it's going to do a lot of damage. Our shaman does run down to see if the door's open just to like make sure that it truly isn't, and he comes back pretty quickly just saying that it is. The pat's coming down, and we're going to try to get a distract on it because chaining this will not be good for the group. Rogue gets distract out, and I'm gonna try to slowly get these guys around Sanguine without having them stand in it to get them back out towards this hallway / the courtyard area, because again, we just don't want to pull that pat. That pat will come all the way to the end of the hallway, and it's a difficult amount of trash to be pulling. So we make it here. This is, I think, the safe location. I think I'm going to pull out in the courtyard just because the candles went down there. There's just, we obviously don't want them to sit in the candles, and we don't want to pull, we really want to make sure we don't pull that pat. I drag them into the fire to get a little extra damage on them. The fire does do damage, if you guys didn't know that, to mobs. I can't remember if it's just to like the witch or if it goes to everything. I wasn't looking at the debuffs here, but the fire does do a little bit of damage. I think it's like 17,000 every second or two, but I don't know if that scales off of the I don't know if fire counts as like a trash mob, and it does increase damage on fortified weeks, but I don't know. But again, doesn't really matter. So we're gonna just handle these guard captains exactly how we've been handling it. So making sure they're facing away from the group. The guards do a shadow cleave, which is a frontal AoE, and then you want to make sure you're kicking the captains because they do the spirited defense. So we're just getting a general kind of kick rotation whenever we can. The shaman soaring in is because it's a 12-second cooldown. The one thing about what's nice about running with the shaman is even though we're running with the hunter who has a longer kick at 24 seconds, our shaman brings a 12-second kick. So now we have 5 kicks with one being on an insanely short cooldown. So at this point, we're trying to figure out what we're going to do, because the worst part about having upper right at the start of the instance is that it gives you the most amount of trash percentage because you have to go a very specific way without doing like some weird cheesy resets on the bosses by using like shadow meld and stuff. So we have to go upstairs, but obviously like we're already at 80% and we still have like the whole entire basement to do. So we're trying to figure out what to do. So we try to shroud here, but we know there's going to be a witch more than likely. I saw this witch spawning and I was like, oh shit, we're going to definitely pull. So we try to make it around this corner here because we don't want to pull that trash that's like straight ahead or off to the right. So we do get the Dreaded Ravens and the Soul Charmer. We're going to tank it here for now, but we're going to eventually kind of like slowly move away because this corner is extremely uncomfortable because there's a pat right near us. There's obviously trash downstairs, and then there's trash off to the left. So we just are kind of in a really tight spot. And also the issue is with this pull is that the Ravens, they do an ability that that makes you lose aggro, and it redirects aggro to someone else. So like we just have to kind of like we all have to stack up and let the Ravens kind of just do their thing. Like even if I taunt them off, like they're probably gonna lose aggro almost right away. And then with the candles here as well, because this door's not open, like we're in a very, very tight spot here. So this is kind of a sketchy part of the dungeon. The Ravens are now sitting in like the candles, the Soul Charmer's coming down. I know the pat's like directly behind us, but we're gonna have to deal with them anyways. And they come in like at the perfect timing. So Sanguine pools all drop, and we're gonna now continue clearing the rest of this floor and then downstairs as well. So same pull again. It's a Disciple though and a Guard. So the Guard again, frontal cleave. We're gonna just want to make sure it's not facing melee. And then the Disciple is going to do like Spellbind and Ascension. You want to kick pretty much everything it casts. And then, even if Spellbind did get off, the nice thing about running with the Druid is that we can now dispel curses while in bear form. So even if it went on the healer, we can dispel it off of them pretty quickly. So it's not even really too much of an issue. We're not really worried here. We're just trying to talk strategy. We're looking really good on time. We have no deaths. We got about 16 minutes left. We only have 3 bosses. Well, we still have 3 bosses, but we're already at 86%. So we're gonna quickly jump down here and do one side. We're not gonna clear both sides because we don't need that much room, and it's just extra percent that we don't need because we're gonna clear the rest of it later. So I pulled the one side. We're gonna keep the enchanted away. Our hunter's gonna take care of that mostly because I'm gonna be trying to maintain aggro from the demon hunter who's pulling 78k. And just making sure once these toads go down that we're going to be moving out of that so we don't get disoriented. Because getting disoriented makes us lose aggro, so I get a Typhoon there, knock it back, and then continue just trying to get this guy down. So this next boss, we want to make sure all of our immunities are popped and a lot of our big defensive cooldowns. Like, yes, we'd want them during the fight, but if you get mind controlled, and like, for example, our hunter, if he got mind controlled and then he turtles, like, we literally are stuck in the fight for like 8 to 10 seconds and can't do anything. So we're going to pop here right off the bat to try to get this guy down as quick as possible. So Lena is pretty much kind of the first one you want to get down. Some groups decide to do offensive cooldowns first and then hero the second round. But we're trying to go all in. We're trying to burn all the way to 50% beforehand, but we just weren't doing enough damage at the start there, as you can tell by the DPS meters. So Selena did go down pretty easily. Our hunter did pop turtle prior to the fight, so he didn't pop turtle while we were trying to kill him. And then we're making sure we're moving out and dispelling that. So almost all the classes in here were able to get rid of their cursed mark. So I just simply moved out, dispel myself, and ran back in so we can keep doing damage. So not too much of an issue. Because we didn't clear the right side, I'm slowly pulling the sisters to the side that we did clear. So there's no risk of us kind of accidentally disengaging or running out, not thinking, and pulling the extra trash, because that's the last thing we would want. Not that the trash is necessarily deadly, but it's extra damage that you just don't want during the encounter. So during Briar, it's pretty much just it's really more of a healer mechanic. You just have to kind of spot heal the person who gets hit with Jagged Nettles. We're back on Selena. We know that cooldowns are down and heroes down, so this one's going to take a little bit longer, and someone will get definitely mind controlled here. We're just gonna, everyone kind of moves in, and we're gonna just kind of except he disengaged, but we're all gonna move in and make sure we're trying to get the mind control player down as soon as possible. So not too much of a difficult encounter. Once you kind of get the first mind control down, as long as you're meeting that DPS check, you won't really have to worry about it. Malady, we're going to want to make sure we keep moving. Once those unstable marks come out, I think as the debuff is called, we're going to just do the same thing. We're going to step out of group, dispel ourselves, and just move back in. Yeah, the unstable runic mark. And then we're going to want to make sure we're moving. I didn't move too much here. I got up to 4 stacks, but our healer pops Link here, which is an extremely powerful cooldown, especially in an encounter like this. And a couple of chain heals, we're all going to be topped off pretty quickly here. So, and then pretty much last thing is just a general kick rotation on the boss and just making sure everything's interrupted, and Jagged Nettles will be healed up. It's on our shaman there, and then pretty easy encounter. So we were pretty energetic at this point because we defeated the boss that we thought was going to give us the most trouble, even on a fortified week. Just because it's a 19 does not mean the bosses are easy. The bosses are, I think, 30%, I think, on tyrannical week stronger than it would be on fortified. So the scaling is still there, though. Bosses still do insane. That Jagged Nettles did about 50% of the health to our shaman. So now we are going into the basement. Now, what we were trying to decide earlier is to Shroud or to Invis Pot or what. Now, at this point, we have, I think we had 30 seconds on Shroud, and we had 20-something seconds on Pots, or something like that, or vice versa. So we were, trying to figure out what we want to do here. So our rogue decides to go down because there is an enchanted in the basement, and I'm going to quickly follow once he starts to go. So we're kind of trying to figure out timers and stuff. So what's going to happen here is you're going to see me run through the basement. I am stealthed, which is awesome that a tank can do this. That's why I like playing Guardian. And our rogue is going to go down as well. So he's going to come back eventually as an escort and then get his shroud up so he can get everyone else to the basement. But we're going to get a reset on this enchanted emissary so we can just handle that now and not worry about it once we get down here. So it's yes, we're backtracking a lot, but we're also going ahead and getting things done that we would have to still do anyways. So it isn't too much of an issue, and we have to wait for obviously the enchanted emissaries energy to go down, and we have to wait for those cooldowns and everything like that. So I'm gonna get the reset here, quickly meld, and they are going to get shroud up here. So we're kind of chatting at this point to see how we're gonna handle this room, if we're gonna do it in one pull, if we're gonna do it in multiple pulls, and now we're gonna handle the trash going from 4th boss to 5th boss, from the Lord and Lady Waycrest to Gorak Tool. So we just decided to do one pack at a time, keep it nice and safe. Just because, again, it's fortified, and any of the witches basically into the coven, this coven diviner, is going to do a lot of damage to me, or has the potential to do a lot of damage, and we want to avoid that at all costs, and making sure our defensives are up for the boss, because this is one of the worst bosses in this dungeon for Guardian Druids for whatever reason. His Lord Waycrest's damage is he applies a magic, well, it's like a poison, but his auto attacks are also pretty much magical, or at least part magical, part physical. So a lot of the damage we can't really mitigate, and we have to heal through, and we can't have 100% uptime on our frenzied regen. So we're just playing it nice and safe here. So our hunter is going to get a reset again on the enchanted, get it as low as possible, and it's going to hit that 20 energy, and I'm going to just say fuck it and go in. So we are grabbing 2 witches here. This is going to be more of a dangerous pull, but we're just trying to be a little bit aggressive, and I do have almost everything up. I just popped Anima there. I have Barkskin up doing a little extra damage, acting as a pseudo offensive and defensive, and I'm just making sure I'm playing it nice and safe and making sure I'm not getting too low. Plus, a lot of these guys are kiteable and kickable, so at the end of the day, this trash isn't as difficult if you break it up. I sometimes will do the entire room at once, but that'll be typically on tyrannical weeks that I'll do that. So you do have to be careful here because the soul essences aren't elite mobs, so they will do they'll go down a lot quicker. So you want to make sure you're moving these witches. I don't do a great job there, and I charged back into Sanguine, so you saw me drop to sub 5%. which was an extremely scary point, and that was my bad. I shouldn't have charged in. I went to get the kick, but I didn't really like think it through. Like, oh great, I was going to charge through two Sanguine pools at the same time. So just want to be aware of those kind of things. So candles go down again. I'm kiting around this little like totem runic pillar thing, and that's pretty much the trash for the entire dungeon. So this is a boss that you don't need a lot of room to work with. So even though there is Sanguine in the boss room, it's not going to be too much of an issue because I'm going to just use the opposite side. For this boss in particular, I like to tank him off to the left because it leaves enough room for everyone to kind of run back with the debuff if they get it. If you tank it in the middle, there's a lot of times like people can get clipped and then it'll spread, and when it spreads is where it becomes an issue. The dot's like insanely potent and it does so much damage. So I want to leave the DPS and the healer as much room as possible to kind of move however they need to, because this is a pretty small boss room. So the plagues are simply just going to be ran out, and that's all we have to do. So when it comes to tanking this boss, you're pretty much relying a lot on your healer. Our healer right now is doing like insane healing. He's doing close to 50k. He's up at 47. Our mitigation isn't going to be as effective because of this wasting strike. The physical magical debuff that it puts on you just does insane amount of damage, and it's really difficult to mitigate. Like, you're mitigating a lot of his auto attacks, but when this wasting strike comes out, it's just going to hurt. And as soon as Lady Waycrest comes out and she's casting the whacking cord, that's also going to do a lot of damage. So this boss is just extremely brutal. You want to make sure you have a lot of your big DRs up, like Survival Instincts, Anima of Life and Death. You definitely want to have a health pot going into this and a health stone if you can. And on tyrannical weeks, like, I'm dreading this boss like the entire time. So Lady comes out, we are getting a kind of just a standard kick rotation on her. So first it's going to be me, and then I'm going to have the DPS follow. So I want Lord Waycrest to go down first. Lord Waycrest is going to typically does more damage during this encounter. Like, obviously he's up more of the time, but his auto attacks compared to Lady Waycrest, like auto attacks and general damage table, is just going to do so much more damage. So I want Lord to go down as quick as possible, and then Lady Waycrest is kind of just like, the boss is done at that point. So Lord Waycrest does go down there, and like that's when we can finally breathe. This kick rotation can actually, I think, be handled by 2 melee DPS, so tank and just 1 other DPS. I think they go off at like 8 seconds apart or so, 8 or 9 seconds apart. So at the end of the day, it's like it's almost like nothing to get just kind of a general kick rotation. So we're gonna fill this up and just be done. So this last trash is arguably some of the hardest hitting trash in the dungeon, but there's a way to handle it, and you're gonna see us handle it here. So I'm going to Moonfire the very last pack, and then Moonfire the middle pack, and then I'm going to make sure that I am as close as possible to get most of that aggro. I'm going to pop Survival Instincts preemptively here, and make sure all the trash is piled up kind of right between these totems. So behind me there's a ledge. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see it here, but our Hunter and our Shaman are up on this ledge because these Gloom Horrors will always jump to the furthest target away, and because they're the furthest away, but there's no pathing available, they're never going to jump and do that extra damage. So all the damage is being put onto me, as you can tell. Out of the damage taken, I'm taking about 90k damage per second, where everyone else is taking like sub 10. So it's a very easy pull if handled like this. Our Shaman decides to come off the ledge, and our Hunter's there, but because of the positioning you have to be careful of, it jumps to the furthest target. And because our Hunter was now close enough and our Shaman was far away, they start to jump again, and you want to be careful of that because of Sanguine. If they jump to a target through all the Sanguine and then have to run back, they're just going to be healing for an insane amount. So I do dip really low here. I don't have like anything. I have barely any mitigation. I just got a second Frenzied up, or another Frenzied up, but I didn't have Survival Instincts or Anima. So that's a really dangerous pull, but we handled it extremely well. Our Shaman like isn't so good. Like, Egg is such a good Resto Shaman. I'm super happy when he's in my group and healing. But now we're going to just jump onto this last boss here. So Gorak Tool, we have 6 minutes left. We're insanely confident we're going to get this down. This is not a hard boss, especially because he only has like 16 million health, give or take. And it's just pretty much going to be an easy win. And we know how to do this. We know we have like an interrupt / like CC order to get these ads down. So right as they start casting, or once they're done channeling their spell to like stun a target, you can use any kind of CC. So Typhoon works really well as Disorient, the incapacitating roar as well. So those you can use if you're taking Mighty Bash for whatever reason. That works as well. Like for our Hunter, his pet stun works, Chaos Nova, and same with like Gouge, Blind, like Cheap Shot, all that stuff. So it's really, really easy to keep these Slayers interrupted, and we're just going to get kind of a general kick rotation on Gorak Tool, and it's not going to be too difficult. There's nothing in this fight that hurts a lot. A lot of the damage is going to kind of be on the group when the as we're doing damage, and whenever this Dread Essence comes out, it's going to do a pretty insane burst of damage. But again, because of the way the Shaman heals with Chain Heal and Healing Rain, it's like no issue at all as long as the Shaman's preparing for it to quickly Chain Heal everyone up to full health. Especially if it's being cast on the tank, and based on my mastery, then the jump potential of the Chain Heal, it's going to amplify that healing. So like Shamans have a really good synergy, like I've said before, with Guardian Druids, and that's why I do like running with them. They don't have the best toolkit in the world when it comes to like being able to do damage and overtime healing like Druids are. Like obviously Druids are like the meta to run with, but Shamans and Guardian Druids, like don't, if you're playing as a Guardian Druid and you're plugging often, don't discriminate if it's not a Druid. Like Paladins can do really well with us, Disc Priests actually as well, and even Resto Shamans and Mistweavers. So pretty much everything but Holy Priest I find is like really effective with Guardian Druids. There's obviously a meta, but like a good player playing a healer that's not a Guardian, like a Resto Druid, is still going to perform really well. So that's pretty much the instance. We get it down here. I think we had about 4 minutes, just under 4 minutes left when we timed it. So pretty easy dungeon. It was really, really smooth. There was some mistakes with Sanguine movement and mobs getting a little extra healing, but outside of that, an extremely clean run. When it comes to doing this properly, like Waycrest is kind of RNG based off of the routes you get. Certain routes open certain doors, meaning there's going to be a certain amount of trash you get to pull or don't get to pull. We got the worst route actually, that I would argue, the Hunting Lodge. If you get like lower right, that's a difficult room because just the trash in there hurts like an insane amount. But you can shroud down there because there's normally not a witch, compared to like going upstairs. So mainly Guardian Druids perform really well in here because of their self-healing capabilities, their insane physical damage mitigation with Iron Fur, and just their massive health pool and amount of armor that they're given for being in bear form, and then also their ability to dispel curses. So when you're going for this dungeon, this is one of the better dungeons for Guardian Druids to kind of traverse. It's very easy for us to perform well here. But I hope you guys enjoy this. If you do have any questions about the build I was running or anything like that, feel free to leave it in the comments below, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Take care.